It's time for our regular office hours with the students of the world. They are now in session. This week, we're going to talk about A Tale of Two Cities. And no, we're not going to read the novel, but we are talking about Tulsa and Minneapolis. This week, we have some, sad news, but important news about the discovery of additional mass graves in Tulsa, which is thought to be the final resting place of the Black victims of the Tulsa massacre, which took place nearly 100 years ago. And this is we're going to discuss that, which is an office hours item in its own right. But we're also going to think about it in the context of Minneapolis, which had its own massacre this year. In a way, and we have some special footage from Andre Samples, who's one of our viewers. He lives on the same street where George Floyd was killed by police, and he sent us this video with an update. We have it now.
Hey there, welcome to Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Heading down the street right now where I live, heading down towards the George Floyd Memorial, just down the way. It's been an interesting summer. I mean, it's not summer anymore, but it was a really interesting summer to be here, to be a part of this community. Right here on our street, right outside of our front door, we had lots of experiences with what we told our 3-year-old were parades coming in front of our house, and we would bring her out and support people and be there with our community. It's a lot has happened. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been meaningful, and we're looking forward to the changes that will come out of this moment, because they will, because we need them to. All right, take care out there.
Wow. So Cornel, how did you feel about Brother Andre's words and and how it might reflect on this question of trauma and what happens when these incidents take place? I mean, you have a personal relationship to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so tell us how you're thinking about these issues.
No, brother, he spoke from his heart, though, Brother Andre. You can see the resilience of his spirit that I hope resonates in all of us. But when you think about the novel A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens says the best of times are the worst of times. Well, for us, it's the worst and the worst. 1921. The vicious attack on Black folk. 2020, 99 years later, vicious attack on Black folk. The cycle goes on and on and on. But we've had cycles of resilience along with those cycles of attack and assault. The problem, I think, is that, in this, given the fact that we're still in a moment where we haven't been able to create any mechanisms of accountability of the police that are institutionalized. So that 1921, nobody was charged. 2020, we shall see. Nobody really charged yet, even though we got the process going, and we hope that Brother Keith Ellison and the others are able to bring the kind of powerful arguments to bear. But it just looks as if the accountability is always blocked for some reason when it comes to justice for Black people in America.
Yep, entirely true. And, in addition to the role of state forces destroying Black businesses, and harming Black communities then and now, you also have the freedom of the vigilantes who are free to, participate in protests, stoke violence, and participate violently as well. And again, very little punishment, if any. So you were born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Do you remember family stories about the massacre and the impact? Was there a kind of intergenerational resonance that you remember?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My grandfather arrived in Tulsa from a little hamlet called Hembrough, Louisiana, right outside of, was it Jennings? I forget exactly the name of the town up in Louisiana where he came from. But they told him he was crazy. They said, Clifton West, you lost your mind to go to Tulsa. He said, they killing black folk like I don't know what. He said, no, they lynching black folk down here. So I got a choice between getting chased in Louisiana or take a chance in Tulsa. And my father was born 3 years later, 1928. So that was 7 years after the vicious attack, the massacre. And then I was born in 53, and I was always blessed. I'm very glad that I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the same hospital as the Wilson Brothers of the Gap Band, the Greenwood Arch and Pine Band, bringing the funk as well as the Silky Soul. And I would go every summer. And my grandfather founded Metropolitan Baptist Church in Northeast Tulsa, the chocolate side of Tulsa. Right now, it's the biggest black Baptist church, I'm told, in Tulsa. So it's going very strong with that beautiful picture of him on the wall. But Tulsa's always been a place, Oklahoma in general has been a place of very free, independent black folk. Even the right wing that rules Tulsa now knows that you've got a number of black folk there that are very free. They're just unable to be able to create some kind of organizational payoff. So in that way, the Ralph Ellisons and the John Hope Franklins, Charlie Christians, all that come out of Tulsa are associated with a certain kind of independence and autonomy and freedom. That's a beautiful thing. But the sad thing is, again, it's this cycle, though, Sister Tricia. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine at 2120, we'd be talking about another vicious attack on black people 100 years ago again? You know, when is this thing going to stop? How do we stop it, you know?
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
question.
And, you know, there is such a resilient narrative that justifies the violence, that normalizes it, that encourages allies to stand by and function ambivalently in relationship to this, you know, unregulated violence.
Very much so. Very much so. You know, Chief Sam came out of Oklahoma, who was a model for Marcus Garvey. Because Oklahoma, they attempted to make Oklahoma an all-black, all-red state right before it became a state of the United States. And so you got all of these black municipalities and black towns of Muskogee and Langston and other places. Oklahoma was the place to go if you wanted to be a free black person. The exodusters coming out of Jim Crow South often stopped and stayed in Oklahoma. And yet, when Chief Sam said Oklahoma not going to work, he went to Sierra Leone. He went to Africa. He took black folk to Africa, and Garvey was deeply influenced by him. We got to leave the country if we can't be free here. And we don't have to accept Garvey's conclusion to recognize the realities that Garvey was pointing at and that Chief Sam was pointing at.
Yeah, yeah.
You have spent time in Tulsa, though, have you?
You know, I haven't spent any time in Tulsa. I know, you know, I've read plenty about the massacre, but
you traveled
I've never
over
been to Tulsa. I know, you'd think I'd been to Tulsa. Well, I'm going to your granddaddy's church next time if I'm going to Tulsa.
You ain't lying, shoot.
I know, and also the home of the Gap Band. That's no joke.
Row. You put you on the front row. These are the special twosome right here.
I would love to go. I gotta make it a trip now, because that's true. I've been so many places, but Oklahoma has not been a place I've visited as much as I should. So now that I know this much, that how much you're rooted there, I'm definitely going to go take a little trip. And as soon as we get done with this pandemic, which Lord knows,
I hear you.
When that's going to be.
Tulsa, of all colors, a lot of good folk of all colors in Tulsa. Just that.
You know, another thing that's really. Say that again, Cornel?
It's just that the right-wing folk are ruling in Tulsa. You know, it's Republican hegemonic across the board, but you got a lot of folk, good folk on the ground of all colors struggling there. Yes,
indeed. You know, one of the things that I think has been an important intervention lately is the use of arts and creative narrative to find creative ways to bring these kinds of critical historical events into public consciousness. You know, the opening of Regina King's Watchmen, the reboot of this HBO series called The Watchmen, which comes from basically a comic strip for all intent and purposes. But they open the whole scene with a reenactment pretty much of the Tulsa massacre.
Is that
And
right? I didn't know
it's,
that. Wow.
yeah, it's the basis of the narrative. And so, it becomes this really powerful way to recall it, to learn about it, to ask questions, to share it as a historical fact, but also as a creative reimagination. But it was very powerful opening scene to the whole series. It's episode 1, scene 1, season 1. Very, very, very powerful.
And one of the things about Tulsa, pointed out years ago by the great Ida B. Wells, was that the attack on black folk, it really began with an attack on the black businesses. The black businesses were out competing the white businesses. And so it became a matter of economics, became a matter of finances, became a matter of money. If we can crush these folk, we can take over not just their property, but their constituencies and markets of people who come to buy from them. And so even the predatory capitalism didn't want to be fair, didn't want to be just, didn't want to ensure that black people had an opportunity to just sell like any other business person, you see. And so the catalyst was a personal thing in terms of a hotel. That generally speaking, it was an attack on these businesses. They burnt down the whole Black Wall Street. There was more black wealth than any other place in the country. The Oklahoma Eagle, the great black newspaper, was very much like the Pittsburgh Courier and the New York Amsterdam News. It was the major black newspaper for the whole black people all around the country, not just for Oklahoma.
That's right. That's right. And, I think what's underneath this whole pattern is the effort to extract and dominate. And you see it with mass incarceration, but it doesn't begin with mass incarceration, because with Tulsa, you have extract and dominate. Whether it's resources directly, as it was with Tulsa, right, to basically end the competition that black businesses provided, or it's the profits of mass incarceration and the expansion of prisons, of police budgets, of private prisons, the entire expansion, which is what? Extract and dominate. And, it seems to me that it's those connections we need to make, because Tulsa looks like the opposite of George Floyd, right? Or the opposite of the police brutality, right? But it's really not when you're thinking about it at the level of extraction and domination.
That's exactly right. And that domination includes exploitation. And that extraction includes expropriation, which is just stealing. But the stealing is not just in the abstract. It's stealing in regard to property, money, labor, all of the various ways in which material issues get connected with the cultural and the social issues. Our dear sister Nancy Frazier, one of the great critical theorists of our day, she always talks about this dialectical interplay between what you're talking about: expropriation, exploitation, extract, domination. And we have to be able to think about all of them interconnected. Now, that's a certain kind of intersectionality that we need to accent, in addition to what our dear sister Kimberly Crenshaw has taught us.
Yeah. I mean, I would use a systemic racism framework for that, because the question is, what's the glue that unites the systemic practices across various aspects of a given society, right? And the glue is not so much a policy, but a set of principles and a set of emphases, right? Extraction and so on. And that's what I think unites it. Of course, it's intersectional as well. I wouldn't reject that. In terms of thinking of it as a system that reproduces the same kinds of outcomes over and over, right?
Again.
So first, during slavery, it was controlling Black women's reproduction by forcing Black women to reproduce. Then at other points in history, it's about using the refusal of allowing Black women to reproduce and controlling their reproduction through criminalization. Then there's, literally using the healthcare profession to control and dominate women's reproductive rights for other political reasons. But, those distinctions fall away again, right? The actual behaviors could be the opposite But when you look at them, actually the outcomes, they produce the same thing: extraction, control, domination, et cetera. So to me, a systemic analysis helps us see that it's like, what are the gears driving toward, right? Where are they going? Right? And then once
Oh,
you
I've
figure
got
that
you.
out, then you
I've
can
got
change your policies to match your goals.
Yeah, to see you raising some complex theoretical issues now, though. See, Stuart Hall says race is the modality in which class lives. Class is modality in which race lives. So that race and class, that predatory capitalism driving it, but it couldn't drive it without the systemic racism at a particular moment. And both are
Right.
changing over time. Capitalism
Right.
never stays the same. It's
Exactly.
dynamic. Race,
That's right.
brother Winnett and Omi taught us that. I don't know when
Mm-hmm.
that book came out. When was that, in the 80s?
80s, in the late 80s, I think. Yeah.
On
Because
racial
it was
formation.
25 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, racial
Absolutely.
formation was 25th anniversary a few years ago. So I think it might have been the 90s then, but
Oh,
it's a
okay.
while ago.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
but it's a very important book. Very important
yeah,
book. Where that
yeah,
race class have to go hand in hand. The predatory capitalism and white supremacy must be always understood in relation to each other.
yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And again, the Stuart Hall's emphasis about the role of cultural narrative in obscuring and normalizing and creating
Absolutely.
consent and support for things that are frankly very hard to develop consent when you only have a behavior and action that's associated with it. You need a set of ideas that and ideologies that have to propel it. And that
Absolutely.
that came up earlier today with Representative Omar, right? In terms of America First. Well, what exactly does that mean? But in terms of the Tulsa, again, it's important that we not say, well, something like what happens to George Floyd, or what happens to Eric Garner, or what happens to Sandra Bland, or what happens to Breonna Taylor, are somehow the antithesis, because those are criminalized. In the case of Garner, sort of street economy, selling individual cigarettes to try to create an economic opportunity when there isn't any, and Wall Street, Black Wall Street, being this flourishing thing. On the surface, they look like opposites, but it's extremely important to think about what exactly the outcomes are going to be. And so we have to see the criminal justice system as a financial boon, as a hallmark of predatory capitalism. As itself, but it's hiding under the ideological framework of criminalization.
Telling you, you're getting deep on me. You're getting
Yeah.
deep on me, but I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, there's a sense in which, at least for me, the bottom line is, even when you keep track of predatory capitalism and white supremacy as a system, it's cowardly murder done
Hmm.
when people think they can get away with it. So
Right.
that whatever the legal system is, they were deputized to kill black people in Tulsa. Right?
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
police killing Floyd and thinking he can get away with it. So that's a continuity, and that's
That's right.
cowardliness
That's
at the
right.
deepest level. But then once we bring in an even more subtle systemic analysis, we can see the ways in which the legal system lets them off. The
Hmm.
economic system is still designed in such a way that there's no accountability even for the people gaining access to capital and credit and resources just to be able to live with dignity, with their
Yep.
housing and their
Right.
jobs and school systems and so
Hmm.
forth,
Right.
neighborhoods and what have you. Hmm.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Wow, wow! This office hours today. It's really getting quite theoretically
Yeah.
subtle. I'm telling you.
Well, school's in session, brother. School's in
School
session.
is in session.
Oh, we're not keeping our 6 feet of distance. We going in. We going
We
in.
going in. I'm telling you, bring your Du Bois, bring your Kimberly Crenshaw, bring your Tricia
Michael
Rose, we don't need
Omi
your
and
text.
Wynant. Yep. Bring
Yeah, that's right.
Stuart
I'm in
Hall.
line and going to bring your text. Lord have
Yeah.
mercy.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you've told many a student not to come to your office hours without a book in mind, although I bet you have the book memorized when it's time to tell them what is it. Well, just go to page 48. The piece you're looking for is on page 48. Unbelievable.